How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the Traveler's Guide to the Backrooms, where we try to go over and explain the lore of the many levels and entities within. My name is Sharp A3, an MEG processing system, and today we'll be doing something a little different. We'll be evaluating 12 different factions within the Backrooms and ranking them from best to worst, though we'll get into the specifics of the criteria in a bit. We've wanted to try out more speculation-based episodes like this, and we hope you all enjoy it. And with that said, let's get into the Backrooms faction tier list. For starters, this isn't a power ranking. We're not here to judge who can throw the biggest punch or warp reality the hardest. This tier list is all about practicality. If you're a fresh wanderer lost in the Backrooms, flashlight flickering, hunger setting in, which groups would help you survive, and which ones might make things worse? That's what we're wanting to get into. With that being said, everything we'll be getting into is of our opinions and may differ from yours, and that's all right. We're entering the realm of heavy speculation, so all gloves are off. Here are the tiers and their specific criteria. Starting from the bottom, F tier is for factions that are dangerous, manipulative, have too many unknowns on the factions to grade, or are outright detrimental to your survival. C tier is for factions who have questionable motives or reliability. Can be helpful, but comes with serious baggage. Next is B tier, reserved for factions who are still useful, but niche in purpose or limited in scope. A tier is for groups with strong allies, but often come with access issues or specific quirks. And lastly, S tier groups that are the absolute best to work with. Life-saving, trustworthy, and highly structured. Each faction is evaluated through a multitude of factors, making sure we touch on core aspects of the group, rather than surface level. Though we should note when going into each faction specifically, we won't be doing a deep dive, as we have whole episodes on most of the groups we'll be talking about, but we'll talk about them just enough for you to get a general feel for them. With that brief disclaimer done, here are the 5 things we'll be looking for in a group. Number 1, aid and public support. Will they offer food, shelter, or rescue to wanderers, or go out of their way to help those in need? Number 2, stability and infrastructure. Do they operate multiple outposts and/or organized systems throughout the Backrooms? Number 3, their trustworthiness. Are they morally consistent or erratic in their behavior? Do the Backrooms in general trust the faction? Number 4, their resource accessibility. Do they offer supplies, knowledge, or safe passage? Are they able to gather, create, and maintain resources at various capacities? And lastly, number 5, faction resilience. Can they survive conflict and level instability? Do they have a strong presence within the Backrooms? These are the criteria we put each of these 12 groups through to find out who would be the best group for a new wanderer to work with. You'll probably already know some of the rankings we'll place, but there might be some you weren't expecting. So, enough setup. Let's rip this band-aid off and hop into the obvious first faction in our list, the MEG. The MEG. The Major Explorers Group, known throughout as MEG, is a humanitarian juggernaut inside the Backrooms. Starting as a small rescue outfit in 2012 Frontrooms time, the MEG now coordinates medical aid, research, mapping, and rescue missions across dozens of levels. Their outposts are fortified shelters, staffed with medics, engineers, linguists, and combat-trained personnel. They issue hazard reports, track threats, and partner with other factions. While bureaucratic, they've got the scale and structure to genuinely save lives. They generally seem as the most influential group, with very little going on within the greater society of the Backrooms without their knowledge. But casting such a large net leads to many holes to poke through. As good as the MEG tries to be, with an organization as big as theirs, bad eggs will eventually work their way through the ranks. Something that was made very apparent with the Rat Master, an individual who was mistreated by their peers while within the MEG. Along with the growing pains of becoming a major faction, their arrogance also began to swell. Evidence of this comes from their occupation of level 51, where a group known as the Lost have tried multiple times to pursue the MEG from messing around a level that the Lost is very well versed in, leading us to wonder why they would reasonably choose to ignore them after being on decent terms with them beforehand. Very perplexing for the poster boys of the Backrooms Society. So with that brief rundown of the MEG, what are its pros and cons? Starting with their pros, they boast an extensive outpost structure willing to take in almost anyone. Most are equipped with rescue squads and offer medical aid. They also provide detailed maps and public safety alerts when possible. They also have a publicly accessible database that anyone can use. It's also the framework on which I was built, so gotta give credit where credit is due, of course. They also participate in flexible partnerships with other groups. This has led the Backrooms as a whole to flourish in much better quality beforehand. All pretty good pros, all things considered, but now let's get into the cons. For starters, expect slower responses due to bureaucratic delays and overall communication issues. A lot of gears have to get turning before any real motion can happen. Next is the inner conflict of the faction. As we touched on earlier, bad eggs tend to emerge more frequently as the group grows larger, which can lead to situations arising, much like the case with the Rat Master. And finally, the MEG is involved with many conflicts throughout the Backrooms. Though most of these causes are for the good of wanderers, some of them could have you stationed at some pretty undesirable places. So keep that in mind before joining any of its militant branches. So, with all we've gone over for the MEG, it shouldn't be surprising that we have it sitting right at S tier. Despite its cons, it's without a doubt the best faction for anyone new to the Backrooms to join, at least for a time. The Eyes of Argos. Next up is the Eyes of Argos, also known as the Eyes within the greater community. This faction centers itself and its beliefs around justice, order, and enforcement. They uphold a divine moral code under the banner of Argos, a many-eyed god of justice manifesting in strategic bases like Level 11's Reality Warping HQ and the platform on Level 261. While they don't provide direct aid like the MEG, they bring structure, deterrence against threats, and collateral protection for law-abiding wanderers. But stray even slightly from their code, and you'll face harsh consequences. They're a well-known faction, and rightfully so. They keep the peace far better than the other groups overall, acting mostly as a police force in collaborative efforts with other groups. But this can be a double-edged sword. Yes, their efforts are helping the Backrooms as a whole when it comes to what exactly they seem to be, as justice can get quite murky. This puts the Eyes in a more morally gray area. And along with that, one can argue what right do the Eyes have taking down wanderers who don't agree with them, as unlike Batman, the Eyes don't follow the no-kill rule when dealing with those they deem as heretics, as they call them. Staying on the heretic train, the original bodyguards of Argos himself turned on him on this very issue. So you can see just how deep the moral dilemma goes for the Eyes. Now with the description over, time for the pros and cons. For the pros, they are a powerful enforcement against chaos within the Backrooms. They have the reputation and the ability to take down most evil-aligned forces within the Backrooms, so you can expect many to know about them and their capabilities. Their functions are mostly lawful and predictable, so it'll be pretty simple to fall in line if you can follow their ideas. Lastly, they support secure bases throughout important areas of the Backrooms that actively suppress hostile groups. But that's to be mostly expected of them. As for the cons, firstly, they don't provide aid or assistance to wanderers as readily as the other major factors, and can be the exact opposite if you aren't compliant. Another con is their punishing ethical system. Fall out of line too much, and you can expect a rough time. Lastly, and most importantly, in our opinion, their moral judgments can be subjective and swift. Not everyone will exactly agree with their views, which could lead to some sketchy interactions from time to time. So, where do we rank it on our list? Taking everything into account, we place the Eyes of Argos in A tier. They're effective in what they do, providing safety and order to the Backrooms, but their worldview is very rigid. But we cannot say that it's a bad one, all things considered. The followers of Jerry. So, the followers of Jerry are one of the most well-known groups within the Backrooms. Described by some as a cult and others as a plague, they are centered around the worship of our Lord and Savior Jerry, a cognitohazardous, blue-feathered macaw parrot with the ability to overwrite a person's identity upon physical contact. But this group is not passive, and certainly not peaceful. Most of Jerry's followers are hostile by default. They do not simply offer conversion, they force it. Wanderers who run into them are either violently indoctrinated or killed. Many report being chased, cornered, or subdued by large groups of cultists, often with the intent of dragging them to Jerry's room or straight to Jerry himself for forceful indoctrination. Once contact is made, the transformation is immediate. Victims lose all semblance of who they were, becoming devout, obedient members of the flock. They often parrot the same phrases, speak of Jerry as a benevolent savior, and take on the same aggressive recruitment tactics as those who converted them. The followers do not negotiate. It does not form alliances. It does not tolerate resistance. it only spreads. And that's all we really have to say on them for this list, so let's get into their pros and cons. So, for the pros, there's really only one pro, and it's a bleak one. There's no pain or worry when you become a follower of Jerry. And I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone join the bird cult people? We're in a place as hopeless and dangerous as the Backrooms, and we can understand why someone would willingly choose to become part of the flock. We don't agree with that notion, but we do understand why someone would. And that's all for the pros. Now for the cons. For starters, they're hostile to nearly all outsiders. Most interactions with wanderers lead to either conversion or death. Physical contact with Jerry results in irreversible identity loss, which is a big no-no to most wanderers out there. There's no diplomacy, no common ground, just indoctrination or death. And lastly, they're universally regarded as a threat by other factions, which out of the groups we'll be going over today isn't something many groups will have under their belt. So, where do we place the followers of Jerry in our tier list? Well, straight to F tier, of course. Though we love and respect our Lord and Savior Jerry, we do not think new wanderers should ever interact with them. In fact, we believe the exact opposite should be in order. The BNTG. The Backrooms Non-Aligned Trading Group, or BNTG, for short, is the backbone of the Backrooms economy, once part of the MEG. Before going off to do their own thing, they manage trade hubs like Slam City on level 186, currency systems when possible, and resource distribution. If there are any merchants or traders around, best believe the BNTG has something to do with it. They're mostly neutral and business-focused, providing supplies and setting up trade caravans, but won't interact with outer conflicts or moral stances, unless it could throw off their trade routes. Like some of the other factions we'll get into, the BNTG is more of a business than a proper group. So joining them would be more of joining a trading union rather than how other groups are formed and run. Because of their role in the Backrooms as a whole, they are fairly important, and having close ties with almost every group in this list, they sit firmly as a major powerhouse, with the manpower and capabilities to back up their plays. But being the living embodiment of capitalism within the Backrooms, and taking their size into consideration, we can speculate that many under-the-table deals are happening behind closed doors. And whether it could be good or bad for some wanderers is yet to be seen. But enough of the speculation, let's get into their pros and cons. Starting with the pros, they have well-stocked trade hubs and secured supply chains throughout the Backrooms. They have access to almost anything you could find here. They maintain neutral relations with most other groups within the Backrooms, meaning you're less likely to be attacked like other groups, like the MEG. Or the Eyes. You know what they say, war is bad for business. And lastly, they maintain some of the safest public marketplaces. Being stationed at one of these trade points would be a great way to socialize with others in the Backrooms, which is generally beneficial for your mental health. It would also be a great way to stay informed about current happenings. Now let's get into their cons. They're less inclined to lift a finger in most conflicts unless it's beneficial to them. Though they do care about the well-being of wanderers, it's not to the extent of other groups. Another con is that they tend to avoid most political or dangerous entanglements, again, unless it could disrupt their trade routes. Though there are records of this not being the case, it's on the rarer side. So, with all of this taken into consideration, we place the BNTG in B tier. Though joining the group may not work out, as they seem to want more seasoned wanderers under their fold, they can be a godsend for much-needed supplies. The Eternal Repository. The best way to explain the Eternal Repository quickly would be to think of this group as the Backrooms Grand Archive. The Eternal Repository is dedicated to preserving rare texts, artifacts, and knowledge about the Backrooms' most cryptic mysteries and more. Their vaults are heavily protected and incredibly valuable, but not publicly accessible. Unless you have information worth trading or a high-level clearance, they won't even let you in the door. Their commitment to hoarding knowledge keeps others in the dark and offers no real benefit to the average wanderer, unless you're deep in the world of research, which most likely won't be the case for green wanderers. Despite this, if you're able to live long enough to come across this group, joining them seems to be quite easy. You'll just have to operate with others whom you won't even be able to truly know. This is because the Eternal Repository requires all of its members to choose a code name upon joining, which they'll only be known as from now on. Trading of personal information between members seems to be almost non-existent in most cases, which, for many, seems like a plus. They're traders like the BNTG, But instead of items, they barter in knowledge, meaning they're on relatively good terms with many other groups. So, with their description out of the way, time to go over their pros and cons. For the pros, they arguably hold the largest archive of backrooms knowledge and anomalies out of all the groups we'll be touching on today, with the Lost maybe being a close second. They maintain heavily fortified vaults and bases, offering excellent security against most threats. And most importantly, joining them is as easy as finding them, which varies drastically. There doesn't seem to be any moral hurdles you'll have to jump or skill cap for them to accept you. Just change your name, hold your secrets close, and you should be fine. As for the cons, they don't provide aid, rescue, or navigational help to those outside the group, unless you're able to provide information in exchange. And they also withhold information from other factions, only revealing what they know for the right price. And lastly, they're on the standoffish side when it comes to interaction with the backrooms as a whole. So finding them to join would be easier said than done. So, where do we place it in the list? We're going to place the Eternal Repository in C tier. Though being part of this faction would greatly raise your survival ratings in the backrooms, getting to and interacting with them outside of bartering information may be too difficult for a new wanderer to accomplish, leading us to place them in this tier. The Backrooms Travel Agency. The Backrooms Travel Agency, also known as the BTA, is a compassionate, non-combatant minor faction dedicated to guiding wanderers, especially the vulnerable, safely across the backrooms. They're staffed by pathfinders, former members of other factions, and explorers who know routes, hazards, and safe passages. Lacking any real outposts or going out to provide medical aid to wanderers, their strength lies in relocation and nonviolent navigation. They're far more businesslike than traditional groups, so joining them would be more like applying for a position, for which they're quite strict. They're fairly simple in who they are as a group, so we'll just hop into their pros and cons. For the pros, all the members of the BTA are expert guides and can get through the backrooms with relative ease. Their inclusive mission statement is fairly simple: shelters children, the injured, and the elderly when needed. And lastly, they are relatively peaceful and mostly non-combative, only going on the offensive when needed. Now for the cons. Being a relatively new person to the backrooms, you'll most likely not meet their qualifications for becoming a guide for them. And unlike other jobs, it would be best not to lie about your capabilities on the job application. Next up, they don't have many bases or outposts for emergency aid. Well, not to the extent of some other groups of its caliber. Another thing is numbers. They are relatively limited in their capacity. So, not as much manpower to defend themselves if a big enough force is on them, for whatever reason that would be. Can't see why they would be attacked, but crazier things have happened. But that brings us to their last con. They are not equipped for violence or an immediate threat, which can easily be fixed if they hired more guard-centered positions to aid their guides, which they kinda sorta already do. Overall, we place the BTA in B tier. They would be a great group to work with if you gained some backroomian exploration experience, which, if you made it far enough to encounter them, would be fairly easy to do. But for the case of a fresh green wanderer, joining them wouldn't be the best play, though they would be great for getting guides to much pleasant levels. The Lost. The Lost is a super ancient spiritual coalition of civilizations, consisting of groups like the Mayans, Greeks, and native tribes who survived by adapting in secret. They travel nomadically, holding deep environmental knowledge and metaphysical awareness. Their strength lies in unity. Harming one invites collective retaliation. But their isolation means they rarely assist outsiders. The Lost is pretty basic with how they operate, but some of them aren't as friendly as they're believed to be. Though you can't join the group as an official member, by treating them with respect and building up a good relationship with them, you could become an ally to them. A very nice luxury to have, but as a new wanderer, this is easier said than done. That was a brief rundown, but the group is relatively simple to understand. So with that, let's get into their pros and cons. For the pros, they have the most exceptional survival skills out of all the other factions within the backrooms, along with maybe the most in-depth histories, which would happen if you're also one of the oldest ongoing factions as well. Another thing is their strong internal loyalty and cohesion as a whole. It's a feat, a miracle even, that a group made up of various types of clans, tribes, and groups from different time periods and having different beliefs can coexist so smoothly together. And lastly, allying with them may grant you some access to hidden knowledge and areas within the backrooms that could greatly help you with your new life within the backrooms. Though you have to work pretty hard to gain enough trust for this to be viable. But it's still possible. Now for their cons. First off, they're very hard to find and extremely selective with who they decide to deal with. So you probably won't ever get a chance to interact with them unless you get lucky or they take a liking to you, which is concerning enough as it is. Next, they have no permanent shelters in place, which means if you do manage to get on their good side and they allow you to travel with them, you'll be under their complete supervision, not being able to do anything within their territory without their permission. And good luck if you ever tell anyone about their territories. And lastly, they won't shift resources nor really interact or help anyone outside their own, unless it's dire. So getting help as a new random person may not be a possibility at all. So, where do we rank the Lost in our tier list? We have the Lost sitting in C tier. They won't be actively aggressive to you, but getting into their fold is a task in itself. And if you're relatively green to the backrooms, I can't see you being able to join them just because of the hurdles you'll have to jump to do so. But don't get us wrong, they're a solid major faction and should be treated as such. The UEC.
The Unbound Explorers Coalition, also known as the UEC, is one of the most polarizing factions in the Backrooms. A group born from disillusionment, hardened by conflict, and defined by a belief that the ends do justify the means. They were originally part of the MEG, but after a catastrophic incident that the founding members believed could have been prevented, they split off to form something stricter, more focused, and far more uncompromising. At their core, the UEC values order above all else. They believe the chaos of the backrooms can only be survived through structure and discipline, even if it means crossing moral lines. They're not shy about using force to protect people or to maintain order. Their operations are militaristic, their members trained, uniformed, and expected to follow a strict chain of command. Wanderers who enter their territory are often given a choice: join the ranks or leave. And those who pose a threat, they're neutralized quickly and efficiently. While that might sound harsh, the truth is that many do choose to stay. Life under the UEC is tightly controlled, but it's also one of the most secure experiences a wanderer can have. Outposts like Camp Exodus and the Bastion are highly organized, well defended, and stocked with essentials. For those who've had nothing but danger and starvation, the UEC's order can feel like a lifeline. That said, they are not without controversy. The UEC has a long list of enemies, not just because of their aggressive tactics, but because of verified reports of human experimentation, chemical testing on captives, and a disturbingly casual attitude toward collateral damage. Their belief in the greater good often comes at a high ethical cost, and that's not something every wanderer is willing to stomach. So, what are the pros and cons of this faction? Let's get into it. Starting with the pros, they accept most wanderers into their fold, and with their patrols making runs throughout the backrooms, it'll be much easier to join them than other groups we've talked about so far. They're extremely well organized, with a strict military command and uniformed divisions. They like to keep their faction tight and well put together. They have some of the most secure and self-sufficient outposts in the backrooms, meaning those stationed there are pretty safe, even considering attacks. They're quite effective at protecting members and maintaining territory stability. And lastly, they're resilient in conflict. They are quite capable of holding their own against the MEG and other major factions. Pretty great pros, all things considered. Now for the cons, which are equally as bad as the pros are good. For starters, they're authoritarian to a fault. Dissent isn't tolerated among their fold. There are also numerous reports of unethical behavior, including torture and experimentation, which could turn wanderers away for moral reasons. They're hostile toward many other groups, making diplomacy rare. So be willing to close some doors if you join them. And the most important con to join the UEC, survival under the UEC, means giving up autonomy, which many wouldn't want to do in a place like this. So, what's our verdict? Where do we place the UEC in our tier list? After reviewing what they can do and have done, we place the UEC in the B tier. Though they come with some heavy baggage, they also provide a decent amount of protection to those who decide to enter their fold.
The Iron Fists. Now, here's a faction that stands apart from just about everyone else on this list, the Iron Fist. Unlike groups that focus on survival, community, exploration, or even domination, The fist exists for one purpose: to hunt down and destroy gods. Their entire ideology is centered around the belief that divine authority, the kind demanded by deific entities, worshipped figures, or reality-warping powers, is inherently wrong. To them, no being should ever stand above others simply because it can. So if a so-called god appears in the backrooms, no matter how powerful or revered, the Iron Fist views it as a threat that must be neutralized. And they're not just talk. The Iron Fist trains its members for this exact mission. These are hardened, ritual-scarred warriors who've shaped their bodies and minds into living weapons. Many have undergone extreme physical trials or even partial death, transforming themselves into what they believe is the only force capable of killing the divine. It's important to clarify, the Iron Fist doesn't go around slaughtering entities for sport. If a creature isn't demanding worship or setting itself up as a god, they don't care. But if it claims superiority, exerts divine control, or starts building a following, that's when the Iron Fist moves in. They don't form alliances easily, especially with groups tied to deific figures, cults, or entity cooperation. And they don't care much about politics or territory. They're focused, unwavering, and extremely dangerous, not to the average wanderer, but to anything that dares crown itself a higher power. So a mercenary-like faction, when you get down to the nitty-gritty. So what are their pros and cons? For the pros, they're extremely specialized in fighting godlike or divine beings, something that puts their battle capabilities quite high when compared to members of other factions. Another pro is that, due to what they're doing, they will always be open to recruits to fill their ranks, meaning they would make a great option for new wanderers looking to join a powerful group. That's all the pros we've gathered from them, so let's look into the cons. They follow a rigid ideology, having no tolerance for worship-based or entity-aligned groups, something that causes many conflicts with others in the backrooms. They're not focused or interested in diplomacy, protection of the average wanderer outside of cases that involve gods, or settlement building. They make enemies easily due to their anti-divine stance. So be ready for a fight because one is coming. And lastly, they're smaller in number due to extreme training and survival demands. They may accept you into the fold, but that doesn't mean you'll last long with them. So where do we put them on our tier list? We sit them right in C tier, as though joining them wouldn't seem to be too hard. But the fact they won't help wanderers in need unless under specific circumstances, and if you did join them, your survival isn't guaranteed due to the amount of dire conflicts the group participate, we think C tier would be the best place for them. The Calig Institute. Now, for the Calig Institute, this grim organization studies death, specifically how and where wanderers die. Their archivists track fatalities across levels, analyze patterns, and log death types and locations to create predictive models for danger. So another archive-centered faction. While they don't intervene, their data can prevent future deaths. They often operate in deadly zones, sacrificing safety to collect data. Their insights are invaluable to factions like the MEG, but if you're a lost soul looking for a helping hand, you might want to go looking for purchase elsewhere. They're the smallest of the factions so far and aren't looking for new members. However, you can operate as a sort of unofficial member if you prove yourself useful. It's unknown where exactly they came from, as they enter the backrooms at once as a group intentionally, something that is quite rare here, and as a branch of a much larger organization, one we have no clue about. That's the end of our brief rundown of the faction, so let's get into their pros and cons. For the pros, it's not great. Our parameters for this tier list is to assess these factions to see who would be best to join or interact with for a freshly green wanderer. And when it comes to the Calig Institute, they don't care for the lives of wanderers but rather their deaths. So for this section, I won't be putting any pros, as joining them in any official capacity just doesn't happen. Barring one exception, but that was in a very special case. Now for the cons, and it's a real doozy. For starters, they do not accept new members officially, and have to do something very important for the group for them to even consider helping you in any real capacity. Quite hard to do as a new wanderer. And let's say you somehow manage to gain membership. This group is by far the weakest group on the list, having less than 10 members. As capable as they are, any real threat could overtake them easily. And that's it. So, where are we putting the Calig Institute on our list? An easy F tier, that's where. This group is honestly not worth interacting with as a new wanderer, in our opinion. Backrooms Robotics. Backrooms Robotics is an industrial powerhouse working in the shadows. Backrooms Robotics builds drones, AI, and automated devices for exploration and security. Many of their machines are used by other factions to scout unknown levels or detect entities. However, they don't communicate with wanderers, and their tech has potentially dangerous implications. There are even reports that some of their AI may be going rogue. They're more interested in advancement than ethics, and you'll never know if you're helping or interfering with them. And that's all for their brief descriptions because, well, they're quite secretive in what they do, which is an overall similarity of business-centered factions. But we digress. Let's get into their pros and cons. For the pros, they're pioneers in drone and surveillance tech, to name a few of their accomplishments. It goes without saying that they are the most technologically advanced faction in the Backrooms. This put them in quite an elevated position with other major groups. They support exploration indirectly through their inventions, making exploring and surviving within the Backrooms far easier. And lastly, due to their diplomatic relations and their technological advancements, they aren't targeted by most Backroomian threats much, though there are some records of attacks staged on the group. Now for the cons. They do not help out wanderers in the same way as other groups. They're far less hands-on when it comes to helping the Backrooms in general. They help by providing tech, and that's pretty much it on that front. Next is the case of their questionable AI practices. There are a couple of rogue AI of varying moral complexities running around the Backrooms that they've created. Some of these are active threats to the general Backrooms, so that's a pretty big blemish on their record. Lastly, it's unknown how to even interact with them as an average wanderer, outside of their merchant stalls. So becoming a member is unknown, with there being no information we've been able to find, which affects their placement in our list quite negatively. And on that note, we placed the Backrooms Robotics in C tier. The main reason we have them in this tier is that there's basically no information on how to become a member. And with how they don't interact with the general public of the Backrooms much, it seems nearly impossible for wanderers to join them, but not fully, as they are documented as having employees. Because of that, we're okay with putting them in very low C tier, almost touching F if they weren't so beneficial to the Backrooms as a whole. But what else were you expecting from Backroomian capitalism? The Masked Maidens.
The Masked Maidens are a deeply secretive and subversive faction operating within the Backrooms. And while they may look like just another eerie cult at first glance, their mission is far more focused than most give them credit for. They exist to root out corruption, and not just in entities or the environment, but in organizations, people, and the systems meant to protect others. Their main target? The MEG, specifically a subgroup known as the Division Trial Testers, but they have their eyes on every other major faction as well. To fight this, the Maidens take on cursed porcelain masks that not only hide their identities, but also alter their minds and bodies. These masks give them visions, powers, and in some cases, irreversible psychological effects. They refer to this as the excess effect, and they're actively searching for a way to control it before it consumes them completely. Despite their flowery language and poetic appearance, this is a militant, organized resistance, one that operates through infiltration, information gathering, and sabotage. They believe in striking from within, planting themselves like weeds and tearing down corruption at the roots. The biggest danger of the Masked Maidens isn't brute force, it's their ability to manipulate and spread. They appear soft-spoken, even nurturing, but the mask carries with it a heavy price. Once worn, few ever return to who they were before. So, with that eerie and brief rundown of the group, let's get into their pros and cons. For the pros, they're highly organized in covert operations and subterfuge, being capable of infiltrating hostile groups and causing internal disruption. They have a strong internal purpose, unified by a shared sense of justice. The powers granted by the masks can be highly effective in targeted combat. And lastly, they seem to accept anyone who wants to join their ranks. This bumps them up quite a bit in the ranking, since a new wanderer could easily join up with them. Now for the cons. The masks they use are cursed, with long-term mental deterioration being a common occurrence among their ranks. This leads many of them not to be able to remain stable or in control of their actions. Next, they don't seem to have many formal alliances, from what we could gather, leading members to act alone and without backup most of the time. And with going against many much larger groups, this could be quite difficult. Their actions often blur the line between liberation and fanaticism. And lastly, they're viewed as unstable or untrustworthy by most other major factions, meaning many of your interactions with the other factions are likely to be hostile towards you. So, where do we place the Masked Maidens in our tier list? We sit them in C tier, as joining them may not be a valid option compared to many other groups in this tier. The fact that you'll have to deal with hostile conflicts due to the group's goals, masks that'll change who you are over time, and other factors, we feel all right placing them in C tier.
So, that was our take on a tier list for many of the heavy hitters in the Backrooms. This took months of research to write, and Scott had many technical difficulties along the way. But we're glad to have been able to finally get this out to you all. What do you all think about our tier list? Do you agree with our placements and reasoning? Do your opinions differ? Making this list was pretty fun, so if you liked it, give us some suggestions on what other tier lists we can do. We would love to hear what you all think. And as always, if you have any questions, suggestions, or just want to say hi, feel free to join our Discord server or email us. Both will be in the show notes. That's going to be all for today's episode, so thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again soon. Until next time, have a wonderful day and be safe out there.